for another Pragmatic Works webinar. Today I'm going to be talking about one of the newer features that Microsoft has rolled out for Power BI, and that is Power BI Dataflows, and specifically how to bring your own data lake, as they like to put, to the Power BI Dataflows party. There's a little disclaimer before we begin. I'm not going to be going over the basics of how to set up data flows and how to use them with Power BI, because we're diving just a little bit deeper into the setup and configuration specifically for how to use CDM folders in your Azure Data Lake with Power BI Dataflows. But there are some really good webinars and videos on how to use data flows. I believe that there was one about a month ago that Aaron Ostrowski did for Pragmatic Works that is a beginner's guide to data flows. So I encourage you after this webinar to go watch that. It's available on the Pragmatic Works website if you want a more general overview of data flows. And with that, let's get started. A little bit about me. My name is Michelle Browning. I've been a consultant with Pragmatic Works since September of this year. Prior to that, I worked in the public sector. I did data work and business intelligence work for K-12 education. I have a 15-year background in data, business intelligence, and application development. I also have an MCSA certification in BI reporting from Microsoft. And I'm a geek, a crafter, and a crazy cat lady. Not necessarily in that order. After this webinar, you can reach me with any questions at mbrowning@pragmaticworks.com. Our agenda today, we're going to focus mainly on how to get started using Power BI Dataflows with your own Azure Data Lake Gen 2 storage. The first thing we're going to discuss is requirements, both for Power BI and for Azure. And then next we'll go over the steps you need to set up your Azure Data Lake store so that Power BI can access it. There are a few little settings that have to be set, and there are some gotchas that if you don't set them up right, Power BI won't be able to see your Azure Data Lake store. Then we'll go over the setup within Power BI to connect it to your data lake. And finally, I'm going to show you how to attach a CDM folder with data to create a Power BI data flow. On the Power BI side for requirements, the only real requirement to use data flows in general is a paid license. You can use either a premium or a pro license. There is something called computed entities, which within the data flow storage itself, it allows you to do computations on the data, similarly to how you would do them within Power BI, but this is in the data flow itself. And in order to use those, you would need a premium license, but I'm not going to be working with those today. So everything that you see today, you can do with just a pro license. In fact, everything that you see today, if you don't have a pro license or an Azure subscription, you can use the free trials to check out what we're doing here today. For Azure, the main requirement is you have to have an active subscription. This does include, like I said, the trial subscription. It will work with any subscription tier, even the free pay-as-you-go tier. So there's nothing really special there that you need. You do have to set up a storage account with hierarchical namespace enabled, and I have a screenshot here of the setup the storage account creation page, and there is a little checkbox. It's disabled by default for Data Lake Storage Gen 2, and it's the hierarchical namespace. You will need to enable it. That's what denotes a Gen 2 storage. If you don't enable this, you won't be able to use it. You'll have to delete the storage account and create a new one. And you can find documentation specifically on how to create these stores at this URL I've provided. It's bit.ly/create_ADLG2. And that'll take you to the Microsoft documentation on how to create an Azure Data Lake Gen 2 store. There is a caveat with respect to the Data Lake storage account. It has to be created in the same region as your Power BI tenant. And you can see this if you go in the Power BI service. Under the question mark menu, there is an About Power BI screen, which is what I have a screenshot here of, and my square got moved a little, but under the top line of that square, it says your data is stored in Central US, Iowa. So when you set up the Data Lake Gen 2 store, it asks you to select a region to create the store in, and you need to make sure that the region for the data store matches the region for your Power BI tenant, or they can't communicate. Now we move on to setting up the folders and permissions, and I'm just going to go through these as bullet points for right now, and I will from here on show, I have a demo for later. I will show exactly what you need to do to set all of these up. There's only a few steps within the Azure portal itself once you've created the data store in order to get it connected to Power BI and make it accessible for Power BI. The first step, you want to assign the Power BI service to the reader role for the storage account. There is a gotcha with this. When you change any access control on the Azure storage account, it may take up to 30 minutes to take effect. So if you're wanting to set this up and you go in and you give the Power BI service the reader role, and then you go back to Power BI and you try to connect to your data store, it might not find it right away. So I recommend setting this, go off, do a few other things, go get a cup of coffee, come back, and then go to Power BI and finish the setup. After that's done, you would need to create a new blob container for Power BI to use inside the Azure store. And it specifically needs to be named Power BI in all lowercase letters. And this is the only container that Power BI will have access to in your store. And then on that container, you have to add read, write, and execute permissions for Power BI and Power Query. And you will also, that is also where you will need to add permissions for any individual Power BI users that need to access the data flows. You can add permissions on the individual folders that you will create within this blob container for the individual Power BI users. And that's how that's another one of the gotchas. If you haven't set up permissions within that Azure blob container, the Power BI users will not be able to use that data flow. The steps aren't difficult and aren't that many, but you have to make sure that you get every little one to make it work. Now for Power BI setup, once you've created those folders and given Power BI permissions, then you need to connect Power BI to your Azure Data Lake storage Gen2 account. This is within the admin settings of your Power BI tenant. It requires global administrator permissions in Power BI. So just a regular user won't be able to do that. There is only one storage account that can be connected to a Power BI tenant. It's for the entire Power BI tenant. It's for the entire company, basically. And once it's configured, the location of this storage can't be changed. It's set in stone. There is absolutely no option to change anything about the data lake store once it's set. And then there also is a checkbox to allow admins to assign workspaces to the storage account so that individual workspaces, users can create data flows in workspaces and allow them to be stored in the company's Azure Data Lake storage. So data flows that are created from within the Power BI service can also be stored in that folder in the company's data lake storage, so that you can see it from Azure as well as from Power BI. And then you would add in from Azure any data that you want to add in from other sources into these folders as well to create other data flows that can be used by Power BI or other applications. The other thing to note about creating data flows is you have to create them within a workspace, and it cannot be created within the default My Workspace. This is why it requires a paid subscription for Power BI to work, because unless you have Pro or Premium account, you will not be able to create workspaces. So you will not be able to create data flows. Then finally, the last step would be to create those individual CDM folders for the individual data flows. CDM stands for Common Data Model. This is a Microsoft standard for metadata. And basically they consist of CSV files that contain all of the data and a model.json file that contains the metadata. And Microsoft has written out a pretty thorough documentation on this, and it is available on their website. And I have the address on the screen there. It's https://docs.microsoft.com/en-us/common-data-model. And with that, it's demo time. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to set up the access control for Power BI on the storage account. This is my storage account here. You will go into this access control, and then under role assignments, you can see that I've already set up the Power BI service here with a reader role. Again, this is because it takes 30 minutes for any changes here to be seen by Power BI. So I can't make a change and have it be seen by the end of the webinar. To add a role assignment here, you would click the Add button and Role Assignment. And then you would select a role, and in this case it's Reader. And then you would select the Power BI service. Inside this data lake storage, I've already set up the Power BI blob container. In order to do anything with this, in order to administer these containers, you must download the Azure Storage Explorer. It's a small application. It looks very similar to an FTP application. It will allow you to set permissions and upload files, and you can download that from here. I've already done so, and you can see my Power BI blob container over here inside my data store. If I right-click on that and manage access, you can see that in here I have given read, write, and execute access for Power BI Premium, the Power BI Service, and Power Query Online, and for my user for Power BI. In order to add one of these, you click the Add here, and then just search for Power, and you will see all three of those come up. The first two, Power BI Premium and Power BI Service, need read, write, and execute permissions. Power Query Online does as well. The next step would be to go to Power BI and set up the Dataflow storage in the admin portal. That's accessed by this. This is a Power BI website. This settings gear up here. There is an admin portal, and then you will see a tab for Dataflow settings. And had my storage not already been selected, there would be an option here to insert the URL for the data store and to get it connected. And then this is the checkbox to allow workspace admins to assign workspaces to the storage account so that Dataflow's built-in individual workspaces can be stored in the Azure Data Lake storage account that you've set up. The next step is to go back to that Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, and we're going to upload some sample files here. I've created, get it on screen here. I've created just some files, some CSV files with data. This is some bogus sales data. We have a month, a product, and a quantity, a sales quantity. And we have February, we have January, and this is our model.json file that gives a description of the metadata. So we have a month, product, and sales. And then we've got two partitions, two different CSV files. So we name those and give the location of the file. Now this location will be the location when it is uploaded. So I'll show that in just a second. This is the location of my data store. This is that Power BI blob storage container that we set up. And then we're going to create a folder called webinar within that blob storage container for this particular data flow. So I'm going to go back to Microsoft Azure Storage Explorer, and inside this Power BI blob container, I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this new folder Webinar. And within that folder, I have my CSV files with data here inside a folder called sales, and then my model.json file. I'm just going to copy those in. And there they are. Now we're ready to create the data flow. I'm going to go to the workspace that I've already set up. Up here in the ribbon, there is a Create button. I'm going to create a data flow. And if you've already used data flows, you will have used this page. This is the option to create a data flow from, say, a CSV file or a database connection. This last option is what we're going to use. We're going to attach a common data model folder. We're going to create a name for it. In this case, I'm going to name it sales, and then the common data model folder path. The folder path is going to be this DFS endpoint for the data store. And then it's inside of that, our blob container is Power BI, and then webinar, and then model.json. And we have a success message. A data flow that is created by attaching a CDM folder will always be noted as external here. And we can see that, and it won't allow us to change anything about the data flow because it's controlled outside of Power BI. So then we can open Power BI Desktop. And we can bring this in and use it just like any other data source. From Get Data, it's in the Power Platform tab, Power BI Dataflows. We connect. See webinar, and we see sales here. And there was only one metadata file, which created the sales, which defined the sales table. So we can see that there. We can transform the data. just like we would when we get data from any other source. I can call this month name if I wanted, and then close and apply. And if we add a graphic here, and as it refreshes, we can see our sales data from January and February. It's not ordered correctly because it's ordering alphabetically. But if you've used Power BI before, you know how to fix that. So now what? Well, let's say these CSV files are being generated by Azure Data Factory, and now it's the end of March, and we have a new file. So now we have March sales. We're going to change the month to March. And change the quantity. We'll save that. And then in our model.json file, we would add a new partition. We'll call it March partition and just say March sales. And then I'm just going to drag these in one more time and replace. And when we refresh, we'll see those March numbers in there. Now, refreshing would be contingent on your Power BI subscription, just like it is now. The refresh would only occur periodically, and but you have control over what's loaded into these folders. And are there any questions?
Hey, Michelle, looks like you have one question in here. Well, actually, you have a few questions. All right. So if you look over on your right-hand side on the panel, you'll see questions. And if you click the square with the arrow coming out, it will expand the question panel for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you should.
Okay. Is it necessary to name the container Power BI? Yes, this container has to be named Power BI in order for Power BI to see it. It's in the documentation from Microsoft. I have actually tried to create data flows in containers that were not named Power BI, and Power BI just cannot see them. will CDM work if all files are not consistent in terms of metadata? I'm not an expert on the common data model. I do know, like I said, that there is a very good there's very good documentation out there on Microsoft's site for the common data model metadata. I have not myself played with files that are not consistent in metadata. That is something that would have to be looked up. What's the file size limit? That again, I do not know. I'm told that it's fairly large, but I do not know the hard limit for file size. I was not able to find a file size limit in the documentation that I read. In your demo use case, would Azure Data Factory add the partition to model.json? Yes, it would have to. Azure Data Factory or whatever you're using to populate those folders and that metadata file would have to add that partition part. Yes. So if you publish that, it's going to create an imported model, right? Well, let's find out. We'll go ahead and publish it, and I'll show you what it looks like. We do end up with a data set here that uses the data flow. So this refresh, again, you could schedule a refresh, but the frequency of that is dependent on your subscription. So it uses the data flows just like it would any other data source, just as if it was importing from those CSV files directly. But in this case, those CSV files are produced externally to Power BI, and Power BI just goes and grabs them with the data flows. How is it different from Power BI Datasets? That's a very good question. Again, this is data. Data flows are a preview feature currently, and we know that they have some more things planned with them in the future, and more Microsoft products being able to use them perhaps in the future, rather than with just data sets within Power BI that are pretty much exclusive to Power BI. So this ETL, this process can be done just once and then used in several different places, rather than having to import them in another place. Can you correct if the data lake account is not in the same region as the Power BI tenant? The way you would correct that, you can't change the region once the data lake storage is created. However, you can just create a new data lake store in the proper region. You would have to delete the incorrect one and create a new one, or just create a new one. Is there a cost to set up the blob container, and how is it priced? To set it up, no, there is not. It is priced. The Azure account that I have right now is actually a free pay-as-you-go account, and for what I was doing here, there is no price to actually set it up. It's billed based on usage in accordance with Azure's own billing, which I'm not 100% familiar with, but once again, that's in the Azure documentation. Is there a way to automate it and not have to add/amend the JSON file? Yes, ideally, you would be producing these files in an automated manner, most likely through Azure Data Factory. You will have to amend the JSON file, but you would ideally do that programmatically when you're producing the CSV files. The data flow, can we use it as live connection like we do with AF? It's only import mode. There's only one way to connect to a data flow currently. Now, like I said, this data flows are still in preview, so this could change in the future. This is very new features here. Do you need a partition for each file? Yes, you do. You do need a partition for each file. Can Power BI Dataflow be used for real-time reporting? No, again, because there's no real-time connection. It really can't be used. Why is the model.json file used? The model.json file, if we look in here, it gives the metadata. In here we have the attributes. These were the columns in our CSV files: month, product, and sales. Month, product, sales. If you look at Microsoft's documentation for the common data model, they have specific entities that are intended to be consistent across all of Microsoft's products, including Dynamics 365. So their metadata standard is why you need this model.json file. Have you done this with Dynamics 365? We have not yet. That is something that I know there are people working on. I have not personally, but it is something that's being worked on. Instead of manually changing the file, can we automate the storage in Azure? Yes, again, this was a very simple demo. Ideally, you would be generating these files automatically, but that's sort of outside of the scope of this particular webinar. It would probably take me all day to show, a setup that this is generating automatically. Does this only support CSV files? Yes, it does only support CSV files. This is the specification for the common data model files. The data is stored in CSV files. In fact, when Power BI, when you create a data flow within the Power BI service, it imports the data and stores the data as CSV files in the data store. What's the takeaway? Power BI data flows are more suited to data lake and big data versus general reporting. Power BI data flows they're intended to be sort of a bridge between the data scientists and the analysts. We have big data operations going on that generate data within Azure Data Factory, and this is a way to allow Power BI to use that, but still do the data crunching, do the heavy lifting with the resources that the data scientists would have. Is there a way to migrate data flows from one data lake to another? To migrate them, not. I mean, you could take these CDM folders and copy them to another data lake, but again, if it's within the same organization and within the same Power BI tenant, there is only ever an option for one storage account, one blob container to be associated with Power BI. It can only be connected to one. And this seems like a big limitation, and I would hope that they would fix this in the future, because this seems to be what most people are concerned about, is that there's once you've set that data lake connection, you can't change it ever. Does it follow the user data security restrictions set up at Data Lake? Yes. Well, okay. The way that security works in data flows like this are, once again, you would go inside on the individual folders, manage access, and you would give whatever Power BI user needed to have access to the data flow, to that data, you would give them access here. That's the only, that is the security for Power BI data flows done this way. How complex can we go on data flows? Can we get multiple files and create flows to create aggregates, filter or subsets from files, and store them in tables and do reporting via Power BI report? You can have multiple files. There are specifications in here for linked files. I don't know that anyone has so far done much with aggregates and with linking files, but it can be done according to the documentation. If the same file is updated by Azure Data Factory, does this remove the need to partition and amend the JSON file? Yes, it would. If you were just updating the CSV files, if we had added in fact, I can show that here. If instead of doing this, we had just added it in to say the February file, and taken this away, well, I say that, did I not save it? If I save it, it might help. And you can see that they show up as well. So yes, you can just keep appending to the CSV file rather than creating a new partition in the model.json. Do we have a webinar scheduled on automation anytime? Not that I'm aware of. Perhaps that's something to look into for the future. Do you need CDM? Can you do this with just ADF and the storage and CSV with the model.json? The common data model is basically the CSVs and a model.json file. That's all you have to create. The only caveat is just, following the format for the model.json file that is defined in the common data model specification. Please show us a slide for web address for document Power BI. I'm hoping that's what you wanted there, the common data model documentation. The presentation is being recorded, and it should be up on Pragmatic Works website not too long from now. Okay, and I think I've reached the end of the questions. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate it. And to those who are wondering about the recording, you guys will receive a recording in your email box tomorrow, probably around noon. If you guys are ever interested in any of our previous webinars, I know Michelle mentioned one that Aaron had did previously. They are all on YouTube. If you guys just go to YouTube and under Pragmatic Works and under our free training playlist, you will find all of our webinars there. But if you guys have any questions or need anything from me or Michelle, please feel free to reach out to us via our emails. And like I said, you guys will receive the recording tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for attending, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful Tuesday. And Michelle, thank you so much for hosting. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Crystal.
All right.